But the message from President Trump to the entire world is very clear. We are done being taken advantage of.
He is increasing prices at the pump, and you'll start to see it within the next couple of days.
And we have a president who looks out for the interests of American citizens. Thank God we do, and we're going to try to do it the best we can.
In this video today, Vice-President JD Vance tells the brutal truth about the tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada. He also exposes the FAA and their failed DEI policies. And Democrats, particularly at the DNC, are continuing to double down on the thing that lost them the election. These stories and more in this video today, but let's start with JD Vance responding to the tariff announcement.
These tariffs will go into effect tomorrow.
Yep.
25% on Canada and Mexico, 10% on China. Are you expecting retaliation?
We'll see what happens, but I think, unfortunately, the retaliation has already happened. The problem with this whole idea that they're going to retaliate is they have already been taking advantage of America for decades. The retaliation is Donald Trump saying no more. We're not going to be taken advantage of anymore, and I think it's important the president is doing what he's doing. Now, look, it looks different ways and comes in different forms, whether you're talking about Canada or China or Mexico. We know that Mexico has allowed the facilitation of the illegal drug trade and illegal sex trafficking for years and has done nothing about it. If they want to be a better partner to us, the time starts now. We know the Chinese, of course, have stolen American manufacturing jobs for 30, 40 years, and also that they facilitated the trafficking of illegal fentanyl into Mexico, where the drug cartels then bring it into our country. We are sick of being taken advantage of. We still have, thank God, the biggest economy in the entire world, the best people and the best workers. But the message from President Trump to the entire world is very clear. We are done being taken advantage of, and we have a president who looks out for the interests of American citizens. Thank God we do, and we're going to try to do it the best we can.
Now, you know what's fascinating about this entire debate? If you think America's immigration system is jacked up, just imagine Canada's and Mexico, right? I mean, people are going to their country on purpose in order to get into America. Not just people, but drugs, firearms, right? I mean, this is what's been happening with our neighbors for so long. So these tariffs are overdue. And we talked about it last night. And you guys got to see that video because the reaction from failed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will definitely make you laugh. Now, here is the opposing side of this debate from the morally conflicted Tim Kaine out of Virginia.
Virginians overwhelmingly rejected the Trump candidacy for the third time in a row. And I think one of the reasons they did is they saw the effect of tariffs during the Trump first term. When President Trump put tariffs on Canada and the EU and Mexico, what happened? It was a tax on Virginia consumers. Prices went up, and then when those nations retaliated, they retaliated against critical Virginia industry sectors, especially agriculture and forestry. I remember going out during the Trump first term to talk to my farmers and foresters, who by and large were Trump supporters, and they were saying, for God's sake, Senator, help us. This is hurting our businesses. So look, here's what Americans are going to see. Higher prices for energy, higher prices for groceries. That's what they're going to see. Businesses are going to get hurt when the retaliatory tariffs tick in. And I'm struck by the irony of last week, the president signed an emergency order regarding energy. There's an energy emergency, and he just put a 10% tariff on energy from Canada. He is increasing prices at the pump, and you'll start to see it within the next couple of days. At the same time, he's saying there's an energy emergency. The emergency is self-created.
Okay, so first thing is, if our citizens are going to be hurting because he has implemented these tariffs, and as a result, these countries will retaliate, then if they, as a retaliation, put tariffs on us, won't it hurt their citizens? I said this last night. You believe that Mexico and Canada can sustain tariffs longer than Americans can? I don't even think that's a comparison. So I find how they complain about it one way. Oh, American citizens, they're going to get hurt and they're going to pay more. So are the other citizens of the other countries if that country chooses to retaliate. What are you talking about? And again, this is a tool to get people to meet our demands. It's a negotiation tool. And right now, what you guys are seeing is an overreaction from the media. Again, we haven't even seen the effects of it yet. Now, I do believe this should always have happened with China And JD Vance talks about that.
What can the administration do about pushing back on communist China? I mean, the president made a remark the other day that, look, it's not just TikTok. You've got surveillance in your own phone if it's made in China. You've got surveillance everywhere. I mean, we've got, spy balloons from China, surveillance, propaganda, undermining the United States at every turn. What are you going to do about it?
Well, first, we're going to impose some tariffs. And I think the president's been very clear about that. The tariffs are in some ways a penalty for the Chinese taking advantage of America's economy, for sending drugs into our country. They have to actually face some consequences for doing what they've done now for 20, 30, 40 years to our country, Maria. And part of what the tariffs do is they allow the president to have a negotiation with the Communist Chinese Party about actually having a little bit more of a balanced relationship. Whereas we used to have one where the Chinese stole our jobs, took advantage of us, stole our intellectual property, and sent a lot of crap into our country like illegal drugs. We now actually want to have a much more balanced relationship with the Chinese, but that's going to require, I think, the Chinese to face some consequences. So there are ways to fight back. We're starting to do that now, and we're going to keep on doing it over the next 4 years.
Now, everything JD Vance is saying is true, and it's always been like that for a very long time, and we haven't actually held these countries accountable. And you know why? Because you got people on the other side of this debate, I'm talking about the Democratic Party, that are more concerned with the rhetoric that, no, this is going to hurt Americans. And they're forgetting what Joe Biden did over the last 4 years that actually hurt Americans. I mean, I don't understand why that is their reaction. And I think they are so allergic to just saying yes this time around on issues they're always going to lose on. Just say yes. Stop trying to fight existing reality. Now, let me show you an example of why I say all that. This is from a congresswoman out of Arizona where she claims that what Trump is doing is going to hurt her constituents. Hear it for yourself.
It's a policy that's going to harm Americans, everyday Americans. The president promised that he would lower prices for everyday people in this country. If you're going to implement a policy that is effectively a tax on the American people, you have to think about that holistically and what's that going to do. I'm deeply concerned about my constituents who already cannot afford to live, can't afford housing. I talked to the construction industry in Arizona. We have a huge housing shortage right now, and we cannot afford additional costs to labor and building. And it's a complete disaster.
But Democrats don't have much credibility on that idea because every Democrat in the House was ready to let taxes go up on every tax-paying American this year through the expiration of the Trump tax cuts. So Democrats have it both ways.
No, we
Tariffs
just don't
are
want taxes
tax.
for billionaires in this country and the ultra-wealthy and corporations. We want
Everybody's taxes are going to go up. Every
class
single
people.
person's taxes.
Stick around, we got a lot more.
Yeah, so obviously she got a reality check towards the end there. And that's the other side of that argument that they tried to come up with, which is, number one, the Democratic Party wanted the tax cuts that Trump put in place to expire, which means everybody taxes is going up. And the reason why they pushed back on that, because then they would have to admit, yeah, the tax cuts did apply to not just billionaires, but everyone. Number two, it was Joe Biden that turned your housing crisis into Arizona into a huge problem. It was Joe Biden that had record inflation. So I find it funny how these Democrats, they skip over the damage that was already done. It's like a habit, right? They use the same thing with RFK, right? They say, oh, well, he's a danger to our country. He's going to kill our children. You guys are already doing that to our children. What are you guys talking about? Now, the other argument that they're making is that Canada's not doing as much damage as Trump is talking about. So why put tariffs on them? That argument alone, there's an issue, right? But hear it for yourself.
Canada is not a major source of fentanyl coming into the United States. It's frankly minuscule compared to what is seized at the southern border. Why is the United States punishing Canada, one of its closest allies, more than China, where fentanyl originates?
Canada has some work to do as far as helping us secure our northern border. So we still know we're extremely vulnerable across that northern border, that we have people coming into our country from China, from foreign countries. We have people on the terrorist watch list that come in over our northern border. And in fact, what we have sent a message this week on is that we're not just going to enforce our southern border. We're going to put extra resources at that northern border as well.
Now, something that she didn't elaborate on, which she doesn't have to, but I want to bring it to the forefront because people continue to push this argument that Canada, they don't deserve these tariffs. Wait a minute. Do you guys know the numbers of individuals on the terror watch list? How many was apprehended at the Canadian and U.S. border in comparison to the Mexico and U.S. border. Let me give you the numbers. Over the past 5 years, it's 1,333 individuals on the terror watch list that were trying to enter from Canada. You know what it was for Mexico? 374. It's not a comparison in that regard. That clearly shows you that Canada, because they have abysmal immigration policies, they allow people just to walk into their country because failed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau believes in open borders. That is the result of that. So again, I don't want to hear that they don't deserve the tariffs.
So Canada needs to come to the table. They need to work with us to make sure that not only can we be good neighbors, but that we can help each other's economies by getting in line and making sure that our immigration policies are followed and that those that are dangerous criminals face consequences. The president has been very clear from the beginning that there's a new sheriff in town, that he's going to make sure he's putting Americans first, and that Canada can help us or they can get in the way and they will face the consequences of it.
Now, President Trump did put this post up on Truth Social this morning. The tariff lobby, headed by the globalist and always wrong Wall Street Journal, is working hard to justify countries like Canada, Mexico, China, and too many others to name, continue the decade-long ripoff of America, both with regard to trade, crime, poisonous drugs that are allowed to so freely flow into America. Those days are over. The USA has major deficits with Canada, Mexico, and China, and almost all countries. And by the way, we don't usually talk about that. That's never actually in the debate, the amount of the deficit that exists. Okay, what does that mean? That means they owe us money. So why are you guys tripping about America putting tariffs on these countries when we are the ones subsidizing them? Please make that make sense. Somebody in the comment section. Now, that total amount, according to President Trump, is $36 trillion, and we're not going to be the stupid country any longer. Make your product in the USA, and there are no tariffs. It's just that simple. Why should the United States lose trillions of dollars in subsidizing other countries, and why should these other countries pay a small fraction of the cost of what USA citizens pay for drugs and pharmaceuticals, as an example? Now, that's a phenomenal question. This will be the golden age of America. Will there be some pain? Yes, maybe. And maybe not, but we will make America great again, and it will be all worth the price that must be paid. We are a country that is now being run with common sense, and the results will be spectacular. Now, my question is, because I know the Democratic Party believes that billionaires need to pay their fair share, right? That's their cornerstone of their entire messaging. Do they believe China and Canada and Mexico should pay their fair share? Why is it that they are allowed to rip us off with these trade deficits? They don't even have to pay what we pay. Again, shouldn't they pay their fair share? I'm just curious. And President Trump followed up and said this: we pay hundreds of billions of dollars to subsidize Canada. Why? There is no reason. We don't need anything they have. We have unlimited energy and should make our own cars and have more lumber than we can ever use. Without this massive subsidy, Canada ceases to exist as a viable country. Harsh but true. Therefore, Canada should become our cherished 51st state. Much lower taxes and far better military protection for the people of Canada, and no tariffs. There's a lot of truth to that, right? Again, if I was a Canadian, I understand the history. I get that you have pride in your country and how it was established and everything you guys have gone through up to this point. I would see why you would never want to become the 51st state of America. I get that. But if we remove the emotion, okay, and we just looked at the numbers, the quality of life, right? I mean, it would be almost a no-brainer, right? I'm just saying. But anyways, again, this is him clearly trolling Canada, and he's applying so much pressure since he was elected on Canada that they're in free fall. And Canada is not in a position to truly negotiate for anything, because what position are they negotiating from? They're in a position of weakness at this point. And of course, you're going to see the premiers of each province come out and get tough and say, hey, we're no longer going to accept American products from certain states, which I'm going to show you guys that here shortly. But the fact of the matter is, this is going to hurt Canada more than it will hurt America. Now, one of the premiers from Canada, particularly from British Columbia, had this to say in retaliation to this announcement.
For our first of many steps, effective today, I have directed BC liquor sales to immediately stop buying American liquor from red states. Liquor store employees will be removing the most popular of these brands from government store shelves.
And he wasn't the only one. Premier Doug Ford said this: every year, LCBO sells nearly $1 billion worth of American wine, beer, spirits, and seltzers. Not anymore. Starting Tuesday, we're removing American products from LCBO shelves. As the only wholesaler of alcohol in the province, LCBO will also remove American products from its catalog so other Ontario-based restaurants and retailers can't order or restock U.S. products. There's never been a better time to choose an amazing Ontario-made or Canadian-made product. As always, please drink responsibly. My question is this: where has that energy been this entire time? Why does it take Trump putting tariffs on your country for you to finally go to bat for your own Canadian-made products? Please make that make sense. I don't get it. Now, to give you guys some context, the liquor business in America alone is north of $250 billion. So I don't think the $1 billion from Canada is truly going to hurt the market. However, you still got Democrats claiming that we should go to the streets and fight against Trump's agenda. And so let me show you the exact clip that JD Vance is about to respond to. Here it is.
We are going to fight it legislatively. We are going to fight it in the courts. And we're going to fight it in the streets.
And JD Vance, during the interview, responded to that. Listen to it for yourself.
We saw the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, already go out and tell his constituents, his friends, you have to fight like heck in the street to stop President Trump's agenda.
Yeah, these people remind me sometimes of the folks that were still fighting World War II in an isolated island like 30 years later. The American people have spoken. They are sick of the ridiculous performative politics. They want Americans, their leadership, Democrats and Republicans, to come together and actually get some things done. You don't have to agree with us on everything. Of course, if you're a Democrat, I'm sure you're going to vote a lot against what we're trying to do. But for Hakeem Jeffries to go out and say that you need to fight in the streets, it's dangerous, it's disgraceful rhetoric, and it's not at all what the American people ask. I think.
Now, JD Vance points out a very key thing that we are seeing play out in real time with the Democratic Party. They're still trying to fight old battles, meaning they're still speaking as if there is a presidential election. And they need to move on from that rhetoric. I get it. In the heat of the election cycle, you're going to say whatever you got to say. I get that, right? And by the way, it has reached its boiling point. Americans are fed up. They're done with it. They don't want to hear people from MSDNC anymore. They're done with the hateful language. Now, the reason why they can't move on is because of what they're focusing on still. And this was a clip that went viral yesterday because I guess this entire DNC forum went on for multiple days where they had to choose their DNC chair, which we had a video on, and they had to choose their vice chairs. And let me just show you the qualifications that was needed in order to be a chair for the DNC. Here it is.
Rules specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 offices must be gender balanced. With the results of the previous 4 elections, our elected officers are currently 2 male and 2 female. In order to be gender balanced, we must elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender. So again, this is what we have to do for this vice chair race. We have to elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender. To ensure our process accounts for male, female, and non-binary candidates, we conferred with our RBC co-chair, our LGBT caucus co-chair, and others to ensure that the process is inclusive and meets the gender balance requirements in our rules.
All right. Well, this leads us to the next story, because when President Trump brought DEI into the conversation during that tragedy at Ronald Reagan Airport in Washington, D.C., a lot of people were outraged by it. They said it was insensitive. But when you see the DNC doing stuff like that, you wonder why he brought it to the forefront. Because instead of focusing on safety, instead of that party focusing on American voters, they're trying to make sure that every single gender is represented. Guys, there's only 2 genders. I don't think they missed that executive order from President Trump. Maybe they did. But anyways, here is Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, checking Jake Tapper on this DEI issue within the FAA. Watch.
Is there any specific evidence that backs up Donald Trump's claims, President Trump's claims, that DEI or FAA hiring practices are responsible in any way for this tragedy at Reagan National?
So, Jake, I think the better question is, am I going to guarantee the American people that only the best and the brightest serve in this incredibly important body of the Department of Transportation, that they're driven by safety and DEI doesn't matter? So I do know that in the last administration, they were focused on not safety, but they were focused on changing the name from cockpit to flight deck. Or notice to airmen, they want to change it to notice to air mission. They focused on EVs and sustainability and racist roads, things that don't matter in regard to safety. Our mission since the start has been safety, and they've lost that mission. And we see when you don't focus on safety and you focus on social justice or the environment, bad things happen. And
let's just exercise common sense. Because DEI was crammed down the throats, especially for federal agencies and departments, we know that became the number one priority and safety took a backseat. We already know the numerous lawsuits against the FAA for obviously refusing to hire people who were more than qualified, definitely bright and talented, and they chose other people based on lower standards and their skin color. By default, that is discrimination and violates the policies of the federal government. So let's hear JD Vance answer the same question from his interview this morning.
Do you have any evidence that any of those hires that were there at the control Wednesday night were DEI hires?
So the president's been very clear about this. This is not saying that the person who was at the controls is a DEI hire, but let's just say, first of all, we should investigate everything. But let's just say the person at the controls didn't have enough staffing around him or her because we were turning people away because of DEI reasons. There is a very direct connection between the policies of the last administration and short-staffed air traffic controllers. That has to stop. And by the way, it's so funny to me, the media has picked up on this, not you, of course, Maria, but others have picked up on this. The president made very clear that he wasn't blaming anybody, but he was being very explicit about the fact that DEI policies have led our air traffic controllers to be short-staffed. That is a scandal. Thankfully, it's a scandal that the president has stopped.
So, yes, you can make the argument that DEI has impacted the airline industry. There's no question, especially if you're talking about safety. The NTSB official yesterday was crying literally on stage when he said, the airline industry, they don't take our recommendations. Now, why is that? Because they're probably more focused on DEI and making more money, not safety.
so listen, it's been busy. We're going to have a fuller assessment of what happens in regard to DEI in FAA and DOT. And we'll report that out. But I will tell you this, DOT is a big department. The only DEI office that exists in the whole department was at the FAA. Now that existed up to a week ago. That's now gone.
This is why you're going to find moderate Democrats and independents disgusted at the Democratic Party, because they continue to relentlessly defend DEI. And at this point, we know results tell a story. It has shown not to be effective. In fact, it has turned into reverse racism. A lot of people can argue that at this point. When you say there's too many white people in the FAA, or when you have a 4-star general get up in front of Congress and say, we need to study white rage, I think we've gone too far at that point, right? Now, here's Stephen A. Smith react to this entire subject about DEI within the FAA and how disgusted he is at the Democratic Party.
I doubt I'll ever run. It's not me. I live a pretty good life, and I don't want to ruin it by getting involved in politics. But I got to tell y'all something. The Democratic Party looks so pathetic after this election. I might entertain running. I just might change my mind one day. I doubt it, but I might. Because how much would it take to beat y'all? And Trump can't run again. He's done.
Now, here's what Elon Musk had to say about this entire debate. DEI has caused people to die. He's responding to a post that Charlie Kirk put up where he said the media doesn't know what it's getting into picking a fight with Trump over DEI in air travel. Here's the facts. The Obama administration threw out all the results of a merit-based air traffic controller hiring test, wrecking the career plans of people who spent thousands of dollars pursuing that career. Then the Obama administration created a new test where they intentionally selected for less capable people merely on the hope that they'd be less white. All this has been proven in the filings of an extensive class action lawsuit against the FAA, and I believe we already talked about that earlier in this video. But again, the bottom line is this. Democrats didn't simply create a quota system or discriminate based on race. They deliberately worked to make new air traffic controllers dumber, hoping that diversity would be the side effect. That's how obsessed the left is with DEI and how little they care about protecting the lives of flyers. So let me know what your answers are in the comment section to this question. At this point, because we know DEI has been injected into this tragedy in Washington, D.C. over that plane crash, are you now seeing results or evidence that maybe that did play a factor here? That the air traffic controllers are definitely understaffed because maybe the FAA is not hiring people in the amount that they should and hiring people who are the most qualified? I'm just asking the question. I want to know what your guys' answers are to that in the comment section below. Now, last night when these tariffs actually went into effect, Justin Trudeau held a press conference where he fumbled over his words and he was panicking because he knows this is going to hurt Canada and he's a failed prime minister. And if you guys want to see that video and us react to it, and so if you guys want to see that video and more stories from last night, all you have to do is click on it because it's coming up right now.